We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Tesamad Aleph in Meseches Eruvin. This is Eruvin Daf 99a. The Gemara had just left off with a question that Chia bar Rav asked on Rav Chinna. Rav Chinna seemed to paskin against our Mishnah. Rav Chinna said you're not allowed to stand in Rishus HaYachid and move something around in Rishus HaRabim. Vice versa, you're not allowed to stand in Rishus HaRabim and move something around in Rishus HaYachid. Our Mishnah seemed to say the opposite. So Chia bar Rav asked on Rav Chinna, he said, well, you seem to be following Rabbi Meir's opinion, who's later on in the Masechet. So the Gemara now answers, who savar? Rav Chinna thought, mi de sefer Rabbi Meir, since that case later is Rabbi Meir, Reisha Nami Rabbi Meir. He thought that the text of our Mishnah should be changed as well, because it should be Rabbi Meir, and he changed the text that it's actually forbidden to stand in Rishus HaYachid and move things in Rishus HaRabim and vice versa. That's how he understood our Mishnah as well. But the Gemara says, Veloi, it's not true. Sefer Rabbi Meir, the end is Rabbi Meir, meaning later on, Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, there Rabbi Meir makes his opinion clear. V'Reisha Rabbanan, but the Reisha, meaning our Mishnah, follows a different sheet that follows the Rabbanan, and it permits you to move things around, and therefore the halacha really follows our Mishnah. It follows the Rabbanan. The Mishnah then said, "Uvilvad shelo yotzi chutz." It said you can move things around, but don't take it outside of its arba amos. Simple pshat is you can't take it outside of its arba amos. In the case where you're in Rishus HaYachid and you're moving the object in Rishus HaRabim, you can't move it more than 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim. So the Gemara says, "Hahotzi chayiv chatos." If he does take it outside of his arba amos, he's chayiv chatos. And Rashi here explains, "Hahotzi hachefetz midaled amos chayiv." If he takes the chefetz, if he takes the object more than daled amos, he's going to be chayiv. Afagav dehu omed begavah. Now, even if he's standing, let's say, above 10 tvachim, so it's going outside the airspace of Rishus HaRabim, we don't say, well, since it went through a makom ptur, it's not a problem. You see that we only care about where you uproot it from and where you put it down. If you uproot it from an area in Rishus HaRabim and put it down more than 4 amos away, that's a problem. He took it from the beginning of 4 amos and he put it down after 4 amos, and that's going to be a problem. So that's what the Gemara is medayik. So the Gemara now says, "Lema Messiah Leila Rava." This would seem to support Rava's position. Diamar Rava, because Rava said, "Hamavir chayvetz mitchilas arba l'sof arba." If a person carries something 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim, ve'aviro derech olav, and he brings it through a makom ptur, just like we just said, he carries it above 10 tefachim from the ground. Chayiv, he's chayiv. So this Mishnah seems to support Rava. So the Gemara says, no, mikatani im hotzi chayiv chatos. It doesn't say in our Mishnah that if you actually are motzi at 4 amos, you're chayiv chatos. It doesn't say that. It says, maybe Dilma, maybe im hotzi pater aval aser. Maybe what it just means in our Mishnah is if you do it, you would be pater, but it's aser, it's forbidden to do. We don't allow you to carry it 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim. Gemara has a different version. Ika de'amri, some people have a different version of this discussion. Ha hotzi pater aval aser, that the diak we make from the Mishnah is if you actually move it 4 amos in the Rishus HaRabim, you are pater, but it's forbidden. Le matiavi tiyuv to Rava. Let us say this is a refutation for Rava. Diamar Rava, because Rava says, Hamavir mitchilas dalid l'sof dalid ve'aviro derech olav chayiv. Again, if you carry something 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim, but you carry it through a makom ptur, you're chayiv. And the Gemara responds, mikatani hotzi pater aval aser. Doesn't say that if you do the 4 amos pater aval aser. Dilma im hotzi chayiv chatos. Maybe what the Mishnah means is that if you do 4 amos, just like Rava says, you are chayiv chatos. Then the Mishnah said, Lo yamur adam b'Rishus HaYachid v'chulu. It said a person should not stand in Rishus HaYachid and urinate in Rishus HaRabim. Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hishtin varok, if a person urinated or if he spit in these situations from a Rishus HaRabim to a Rishus HaYachid or vice versa, chayiv chatas, he is chayiv chatas. So the Gemara says, don't you need to have an akira and anacha from an area that's 4 tvachim wide? You don't have it in this case. So the Gemara says, machshavto meshav yulei makom. His machshava, since he has an intention in this case to do this transfer, so that makes it as though it's going from an area that's 4 tvachim wide. And Rashi over here says, Machshavto shu tzarich lekach, since he has a need for this transfer, meshav yula hotzah chashuva. It makes it a hotzah chashuva. You don't need a makom dalid in this particular case. If we don't say this, Hadam Rava, what about that which Rava said? Zorak v'noch b'fi hakelev. Let's say a person throws it and it lands in the mouth of a dog. Oh, b'fi hakivshon, or it falls into the mouth of a furnace, it falls into a fire. Chayev chatas, you're chayev chatas in these cases. What about the halacha that you need hanacha on top of an area that's 4 tvachim? Obviously, his machshava can make it as if it's a makom dalid. The same thing over here. His machshava makes it a makom dalid. The Gemara finishes. Boy, Rava asks, who b'rishas hayachid? If he's in rishas hayachid, ufiyama b'rishas harabim, his aver is in rishas harabim. Ma, what do we follow? Basar akira azlinan. Do we follow where it gets uprooted, meaning from his body where he is standing? O basar yitzia azlinan, or do we follow where the urine actually exits? So take what the Gemara says. We'll leave that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. V'chein lo yaruk. Again, a person shouldn't spit. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says v'chulu. Rabbi Yehuda says that if a person has spit in his mouth, he shouldn't even walk 4 amos in rishas harabim because it's as if he's carrying the spit 4 amos in rishas harabim. So the Gemara says afa gavdelo hafechba. This seems to be true according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though he didn't turn it over in his mouth, meaning he didn't get ready to spit it out. Still, it's considered carrying in rishas harabim. V'atanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, hayaochel devela. A person is eating pressed figs, biyadayim misoavas, and his hands are tamei. V'hechnes yado lesoch piv, and he puts his hand into his mouth, litol tzror, in order to take out a pebble. Rabbi Meir metame, Rabbi Yossi metayer. Rabbi Meir says tamei, and Rabbi Yossi says tar. The issue over here is, in order for this devela to be tamei, it has to be muchshel lekabel tumah. It has to touch some type of a liquid in order to be able to receive the tumah. Now, spit would count as one of these kinds of liquids. So the question over here is, when the person is sticking his hand in his mouth to take out this tzror, is that liquid that's now touching the devela, is it machshir to be makabel tumah? So it's machlokas Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yehuda says hefech ba tamei. If he turned over the spit in his mouth, then it's tamei. Then it's already like a loose liquid. It can be machshir lekabel tumah. Lo hefech ba tar, but if he didn't turn it over in his mouth, the liquid, the spit, does nothing, and it's tar. So the Gemara assumes the same thing should be true in terms of carrying in rishas harabim on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda should make a distinction between hefech ba and lo hefech ba. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Muchlefes Hashita. This really is a contradiction. You have to switch around the opinions. Rabbi Yehuda is not the one who made the distinction between hefech ba and lo hefech ba. Rabbi Yehuda says always tamei, and it was a different Tana who said there's a distinction between these two things. Reish Lakish says, L'yolam lo sachlef, don't switch around the shitas. V'hacha b'mayaskinan bekicho. But in our Mishnah, we're talking about phlegm. There's a difference between spit and phlegm, and when you're talking about phlegm, you're chayav for carrying it regardless. You don't have to turn it over in your mouth. Gemara says, V'atanya, but we learned in a Braisa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer kicho v'nislash, that if you have phlegm and it gets uprooted, my lav rok v'nislash, doesn't that mean spit as well? Gemara says, lo, kicho v'nislash. No, maybe it just means phlegm. Gemara says Vatanya, but we learned in a Braisa. Rabbi Yehuda says Kicho shenislash v'chein roko shenislash. Doesn't matter if it's phlegm that you uproot. Doesn't matter if it's spit. Lo yahalech daled amos ad shayarik. You can't walk 4 amos with the phlegm or the spit in your mouth until you spit it out. So clearly, Rabbi Yehuda does not make a distinction between coughing up something and between spit. And so again, we're back to our contradiction. So the Gemara says, you're right. Go back to what we answered before. You have to reverse the shitas in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda, in fact, does not make a distinction between hefech ba and lo hefech ba. Gemara continues at the 2 dots. Amar Reish Lakish says, Kiach b'fnei Rabba, a person spits out phlegm in front of his Rebbe, chayiv misa, is chayiv misa. Shenemar, like it says, Kol masanei evu maves, all that hate me, they love death. Al tikri l'masanei ela l'masniyai, those who cause me to be hated. So the Gemara says, but why is it this guy's fault? It happened to him against his will. So the Gemara says, Kiach v'rok k'amrina. No, we're specifically talking about he spit in front of his Rebbe. Not just that he brought the phlegm up, he actually spit it out. As Rashi over here says, first of all, he was sick, he had a cold. Why is this it was cold outside? Why is it his fault? And the Gemara says, Kiach v'rok ko'amrinan. Sherokak oso b'fnei Rabbo. He spit it out in front of his Rebbe. V'ayolo lestalik misham. He should have removed himself from that area. Or lavlio b'chsuso, or absorb it in some kind of a garment. He shouldn't have spit it out right in front of him. So that's why he's, so to speak, chayev misa. Gemara now continues with the Mishnah. Lo yamad adam b'rishas hayachid v'yishte b'rishas harabim. A person should not stand in rishas hayachid and drink in rishas harabim. B'rishas harabim v'yishte b'rishas hayachid. He shouldn't stand in rishas harabim and drink in rishas hayachid. Elim kein hechnes rosho v'rubo l'makom shehu shosa. Unless he has his head and the majority of his body in the area where he's actually drinking. V'chein begas, Rashi says, v'chein begas mefarish begemara l'inyan meiser. The Gemara in the next Amud is going to explain that this last line is talking about the halachas of meiser. So the Gemara says, Reisha Rabbanon v'sefer Rabbi Meir. What's going on over here? The first case of the Mishnah is the Rabbanon, and the end suddenly switches to Rabbi Meir. Rashi says, Reisha Rabbanon le'elu kimna lahadikatani omed adam b'rishas hayachid u'metaltel b'rishas harabim k'Rabbanon. We just said earlier on the Amud that the Mishnah on the previous Amud is talking about, according to the Rabbanon, a person is allowed to stand in rishas hayachid and move things in rishas harabim. The pliga allowed to Rabbi Meir, b'masisin gab maftech, and Rabbi Meir argues with this. V'lo gazrin and shemiyachnis. The Rabbanon are lenient; they're not afraid you're going to bring the thing into the other domain. V'hacha gazar, but here there is a gezerah. Shemiyachnis Rabbi Meir. Right here we're afraid you shouldn't stand in rishas hayachid and drink something in rishas harabim. So why is it that we seem to be switching? The last Mishnah follows the opinion of the Rabbanon who are lenient, and suddenly here we're going like Rabbi Meir who's strict. And the Gemara says, maybe you'll say, well, the drinking of the water is not the same thing at all, because you're actually taking it from one rishus into your stomach, into the other rishus. Kimashtin varog, maybe it's similar, it's like the opposite of urinating or spitting out. It's the same thing. You're taking from one rishus to the other. It has nothing to do with a concern that you might move it from one rishus to the other. You actually are moving it from one rishus to the other. He says, "Delo dami, it's not comparable. The hasam ka'akar me'rishazu, v'kavet hanachal rishazu." Let's say you're spitting or urinating, you're being okar from one rishus and placing it in another. Avol shosa avet akir v'hanacha b'chad rishusa. But when you're drinking, it's all the akir and the hanacha are all happening in the same rishus because the hanacha is really in your mouth. Shosa ba piv omed. That's where his mouth is. Uvepiv heinachan miyad. The hanacha is considered to be in the mouth. It's not considered to be in the stomach. So you can't make that distinction. So in any case, we seem to have either a contradiction in Mishnayos, or we're saying one Mishnah is Rabbanon and it suddenly switches to Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef answers, B'chafetzin shetzrichin lo. We're talking about objects that he needs, v'divrei hakol, and everybody could agree. Rashi says, B'chafetzin shetzrichin lo, afilu Rabbanon modu, the gazer behu, the mitoch shut sarach lahem. When you have something that you need, that you require, yachnis emetzlo, there's more of a concern that you're going to actively transfer it from one domain to the other. Hilkach mashkin halalo tzrichin lo. In this case, he requires these drinks, v'gazrinan, and we actually do make a gezer, and even the Rabbanon would agree that we make a gezer in this case. Gemara says, they asked the following question, Karmelis Mai. What if he's in a Karmelis? Instead of being a situation of a Rishus Harabim and Rishus Hayachid, he's standing in a Karmelis and he's drinking in Rishus Hayachid or in Rishus Harabim. What would be the halacha? Amar Abaye, so Abaye said, it's the same thing. The same prohibition would apply in that case. Amar Rava, so Rava said to Abaye, he gufa gezer. What are you talking about? The whole thing is a gezerah. The whole reason why he's not allowed to stand in Rishus Hayachid and drink in Rishus Harabim is because he might end up transferring from the Rishus Harabim to the Rishus Hayachid. So v'anon neikam v'nigzar gezerah le-gezerah. Now we're going to make a gezerah on another gezerah. Karmelis itself is a gezerah, and drinking in one Rishus when you're standing in another Rishus is a gezerah. Now we're going to double up and say you're not allowed to stand in Rishus Hayachid and drink in a Karmelis. That's like a double d'Rabbanan. Gemara says, Amar Abaye, so Abaye said, Minoa Aminullah, where can I prove this to you? Midiktani, because it says, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Beis.